I hope that everyone understands. I hope everybody takes it well. And it's been a long process here and how best to get there. And it just seems like leaving is going to be the best opportunity for me.
Success has a price, but for Aaron Kaufman, that price became too high to pay. Behind the flashy cars and the loud music was a dynamic that nearly broke the best builder in the business. People always wondered why Aaron walked away from millions of dollars and global fame without looking back. Today, we look at the friction, the secrets, and the person Aaron finally named as the most evil part of his journey, the 110-hour marathon. The first season of Fast and Loud hit TV screens in 2012 and introduced the world to Gas Monkey Garage. On the surface, it looked like a dream job, but the schedule was a brutal reality. Richard Rawlings made a high-stakes deal with Discovery Channel to deliver 12 completed car builds in only 24 weeks. This was an incredibly fast pace because most professional custom shops take months or even years to finish a single high-quality project. Richard committed to this timeline to ensure the show got picked up, but he did so without asking Aaron Kaufman if it was physically possible to achieve. Because of this deal, Aaron had to work roughly 110 hours every single week to meet the network deadlines. As the lead mechanic and fabricator, the success of every build rested entirely on his shoulders. Aaron lived in Fort Worth, while the garage was located in Dallas. This was a 45-mile drive that could easily take over an hour each way due to the heavy Texas traffic. Eventually, the exhaustion became too much to handle, and Aaron stopped going home altogether. He began sleeping on the concrete floor of the shop or in the back of customer trucks just to save time. There were many nights where Aaron stayed awake for 38 hours straight. He would spend the entire night welding and wrenching just so the car would be ready when the cameras started rolling the next morning. When he needed to wake up, he would go behind the shop and wash his face with a cold garden hose. His close friend and fellow builder Scott McMillan worked right alongside him during that first year. Scott saw firsthand that while Aaron was covered in grease and dirt, Richard would often arrive in clean clothes, film his scenes for the show, and then leave. The pressure of the show created a lopsided dynamic. While Aaron was the mechanical engine of the entire brand, he was often treated like a piece of equipment rather than a partner. During one filming session, a director asked Richard how important Aaron was to the garage. Richard laughed and joked that he should keep Aaron chained to the floor so that no other shop could ever take him away. The camera crew laughed at the joke, but Aaron was working under a car nearby and heard every word. He was quickly realizing that his hard work was building someone else's empire, and the physical toll was only just beginning. But the physical exhaustion was only half of the problem because Richard was about to put a price tag on something Aaron never expected to sell. The $6 million shadow. As the show became a massive hit, Gas Monkey Garage grew into a global brand worth millions of dollars. Richard was a master at marketing, and he used the popularity of the show to launch many new businesses. He opened a massive restaurant called the Gas Monkey Bar and Grill, and a music venue called Gas Monkey Live. He also signed deals for energy drinks, clothing lines, and even a brand of cinnamon tequila. By 2014, the Gas Monkey name was everywhere, and the business was bringing in an estimated $6 million in annual revenue through these various ventures. All of these monies coming in started to change how the shop worked. Richard was constantly chasing the next six-figure deal. He was flying all over the country to buy collections of cars that were basically piles of rust. Every time Richard bought a new car, he would walk into the shop with a big grin and tell Aaron they had to flip it in 2 weeks. He didn't care if the engine was blown or if the frame was bent. He just wanted it finished so he could sell it for a huge profit on camera, which of course was where the friction started. The fact is, Aaron was a guy who cared about the tiny details. He wanted the welds to be perfect and wanted the car to be safe for the person who bought it. But Richard was focused on the bottom line. If a car looked good on TV, Richard was happy. He would tell the guys to just get it running and get it out the door. To Aaron, this felt like he was being forced to do bad work just to make Richard richer. Obviously, there was a massive gap between the two men. Richard was living the high life, wearing expensive watches and driving the fastest cars. Meanwhile, Aaron was still the guy in the work boots and the dusty cap. People started to realize that without Aaron's talent, the Gas Monkey brand was just a loud guy in a fancy shirt. Richard knew this too. He knew that Aaron was the one doing the real heavy lifting that kept the $6 million empire from falling apart. But instead of giving Aaron more time to do things the right way, Richard just piled on more pressure. He treated the shop like a factory line instead of a place where craftsmen worked. Every time a build was finished, Richard was already standing there with the next one, pushing Aaron to go even faster. It started to feel like Aaron was a prisoner of the very success he helped create. He was the soul of the shop, but he was starting to feel like he was being sold out for a quick buck. The money was flowing in, but the respect was flowing out. Aaron began to see that his boss cared more about the logo on the wall than the man holding the wrench. He was tired of being the silent partner in a loud man's game, and he was starting to wonder if his surgical skills were being wasted on junk. The surgical mechanic versus the snake oil salesman. In order to understand how these two men ended up in such a messy spot, you have to go back to the very start. It was 2003 in Dallas, Texas. Richard was not a TV star yet. He was just a guy with a lot of energy who sold healthcare stuff during the day and played with cars at night. One day, he walked into a local garage because he needed help with a ride he was working on. That is where he saw a young Aaron Kaufman for the first time. Richard stood there and watched Aaron work for about 20 minutes. He did not see a normal mechanic, but a kid who was very intentional with his work. He was so good with his tools that he moved around an engine like a doctor performing a very important surgery. He focused and way better than anyone else in the room. Richard had a gut feeling right then and there, so of course he offered Aaron a job on the spot. Back then, Gas Monkey Garage was a tiny side project. It was just a small, dusty building where they took on odd jobs. In those early years, it was just the two of them against the world. They would load cars onto a trailer and drive across the country to different car shows. The routine was always the same. Richard would drive the truck during the day while he made phone calls and talked a big game. Then, when the sun went down, Richard would pop open a cold beer, slide into the passenger seat, and hand the wheel to Aaron. Aaron would drive all through the night while Richard slept. This told you everything you needed to know about their dynamic. Richard was the talker. He was the one who could sell a car to a guy who didn't even have a driver's license. He was like a snake oil salesman from the old days, full of big promises and fast talk. Aaron was the doer. He was the one who stayed up all night making sure the wheels didn't fall off. Richard later called those road trips the best times of his life, but if you ask Aaron, he rarely talks about them at all. As the shop got famous, the gap between the salesman and the mechanic got wider. Richard loved the cameras, the fame, and he loved being the face of the brand. But Aaron just wanted to be a builder. He had no formal training and never went to a fancy car school. He learned everything by tearing things apart in his garage as a kid. By the time he was 16, he was already famous in his hometown for fixing things that experts said were broken forever. He was a real craftsman stuck in a world made for TV. While Richard was out front doing shots of tequila and shouting his catchphrases, Aaron was in the back trying to solve complex engineering problems with a deadline hanging over his head. It was a ticking time bomb. The salesman wanted things fast and cheap, but the surgeon wanted things perfect. Soon, the man who sold the dream and the man who built it were going to have a head-on collision, the beard ownership clause. By 2014, Fast and Loud was a global phenomenon. Aaron's face was everywhere, and a big part of that face was covered by his famous bushy beard. It had become his trademark. Fans loved it, and the network loved it even more. But for Aaron, it was just hair. One day he decided he was tired of the heat and the mess. So he mentioned to the show producers that he was thinking about shaving it off. He thought it would be a funny little update. Instead, the room went cold. The producers looked at him and gave a very firm answer, no. They told him he was not allowed to shave. They didn't say it would be better if he kept it, and they didn't ask him to wait until the end of the season. They straight up told him he did not have the right to change his own face. Aaron was stunned. He was a grown man, a master builder, and a partner in the shop. Yet here were people in suits telling him he couldn't use a razor in his own bathroom. This was the moment Aaron realized that to the TV world he wasn't a human being anymore. He was a character. He was the bearded wonder, a piece of intellectual property that belonged to a corporation. If he changed his look, it might mess up the continuity of the episodes or hurt the sales of Gas Monkey t-shirts that featured his fuzzy chin. The beard had become a logo, and the logo was more important than the man wearing it. Aaron does not like being told what to do. He is a quiet guy, sure, but he has a spine of steel. He told the producers very calmly that he didn't react well to being bossed around. He made them a deal and said if they asked him nicely as a favor, he would keep the beard for them. But if they tried to force him or tell him he wasn't allowed, he would walk straight to the store, buy a pack of cheap razors, and shave every bit of it off on camera while they watched. He wasn't joking. The producers realized they had pushed him too far and quickly changed their tone. They asked nicely, and Aaron kept the beard. But inside, something had broken. He started to see the evil side of fame. It wasn't just about the long hours anymore. It was about control. Richard and the network were making millions of dollars off his image, and they felt like they owned every part of him, right down to his skin. This realization made him look at the shop differently. He started to see that the more famous Gas Monkey got, the less freedom he actually had. And as the show moved forward, the limits on his creativity were about to get even tighter than the limits on his facial hair. The build that broke the camel's back. If there was one car that showed the world exactly why Aaron was done with Gas Monkey, it was a 1972 De Tomaso Pantera. This build was not just another job. For Aaron, it was a dream project. He did not want to just slap some paint on it and flip it for a quick profit. He wanted to do something that had never been done before. He decided to take a modern twin-turbo EcoBoost engine and cram it into the back of this classic Italian sports car. This was a massive engineering puzzle. The engine did not fit and the turbos were in the wrong place. There were no parts in the world that could make this work, so Aaron had to build them himself. He spent weeks making custom headers and a special intake from scratch. This was Aaron at his absolute best. He was learning and he was building a masterpiece. He said later that he learned more on that one car than he did on the last 10 builds combined. But while Aaron was in the zone, the TV world was getting impatient. The network and Richard did not care about surgical engineering, as it were. They cared about the clock, and to them, every hour Aaron spent perfecting a weld was an hour they weren't filming a sale. The showrunners started to push back. They told him that these kinds of big, complex builds were too slow for television. They wanted cars that could be finished in a few days, not a few months. After the Pantera, the rules changed. The bosses basically told Aaron that he was done with big, creative projects. From now on, they only wanted small, fast, and cheap flips. They wanted things that looked flashy on a screen but didn't require too much thinking. For a guy like Aaron, this was like being told he could only paint with one color for the rest of his life. He had all this talent and all these big ideas, but he was being forced to build junk just to keep the show moving. Aaron tried to pitch other cool ideas, like a monster truck for a big race or high-end racing builds, but the answer was almost always no. It was too expensive. It took too long. It wasn't gas monkey enough. Aaron realized that as long as he stayed, he would never be allowed to be a real builder again. He would just be a guy who fixed up old trucks for a salesman to sell. The Pantera was his peak, but it also showed him the edge of the cliff. He saw that Richard and the cameras were never going to let him grow. He had reached the point where he had to choose between being a TV star and being a craftsman. He knew he couldn't do both anymore, and the weight of that choice was finally starting to break him. The not my friend bombshell. After 14 years of working side by side, most people would think Richard and Aaron were best friends. They had spent thousands of hours in the same small shop and traveled thousands of miles in the same truck. More impressively, they had built a massive business together from nothing. But once the camera stopped rolling and the partnership ended, Richard said something that left fans in total shock. He told reporters that Aaron had never actually been his friend. He said Aaron was just an employee. This felt like a slap in the face to anyone who had watched the show. On TV, Richard always called Aaron his main man or his partner. They looked like a team, but Richard's words revealed the cold truth about how he saw the relationship. To him, Aaron was a tool. He was a very talented tool that made him a lot of money, but he was still just a guy on the payroll. Richard said that from the time Aaron was 20 until he was 34, their connection was strictly about work. When Aaron heard this, he didn't fire back with angry words. That is not his style. Instead, he just stayed quiet on the matter, which spoke volumes. He had given his entire young adult life to Gas Monkey. He had worked until his fingers bled and his eyes couldn't stay open. He had driven through the night while Richard slept in the seat next to him. To be told after all that time that he was just an employee was a huge reality check. The truth is, these two men were on completely different planets. Richard loved the power that came with being a boss. He loved the idea that he was the king of the castle and everyone else was just there to serve his vision. Aaron, on the other hand, just wanted to be part of a team of builders who respected each other. He realized that while he was pouring his heart into the cars, Richard was only looking at him as a line on a spreadsheet. Richard even went a step further by writing in a blog that it was an insult to the rest of the crew to say the shop couldn't survive without Aaron. He was trying to downplay everything Aaron had done to make Gas Monkey famous. He wanted the world to believe that Aaron was replaceable. But fans knew better. They knew that Aaron was the brain and the hands of the operation. Without him, the shop was just a loud man standing in an empty room. This bombshell was the final proof Aaron needed. He wasn't leaving a friendship, but was escaping a lopsided deal where he gave everything and got very little respect in return. He knew that if he stayed, he would always be seen as just a worker in Richard's shadow. It was time to find out if he could be the boss of his own life. But first, he had to figure out how to walk away from the cameras for good. The silent exit and the left field lie. By the end of 2016, Aaron was a ghost in his own shop. He would sit in his truck after work and just stare at the building. He knew he couldn't do one more day of the TV circus. So, he did what any professional would do. He sat down and told the people in charge that he was moving on, and he gave them plenty of time to get ready for a future without him. But when the news finally broke to the public in early 2017, the story changed. Richard went on the Gas Monkey website and wrote a big post for the fans. He said that Aaron's choice to leave came completely out of left field. This was a huge lie. Richard made it sound like Aaron had just walked out one morning without saying a word, leaving the shop in total chaos. He played the victim, making it seem like he was shocked and hurt by a sudden betrayal. In reality, Aaron had been talking about leaving for a long time. The bosses knew it was coming. Richard knew it was coming. But telling the truth wouldn't make for good drama. Richard wanted to keep the Gas Monkey brand looking strong, so he tried to make Aaron look like the bad guy who quit on his team. He even wrote, that it would be an insult to the rest of the crew to say the shop needed Aaron to survive. He was trying to protect his wallet by acting like his star builder didn't really matter that much. Aaron stayed silent while all these rumors were flying around. He didn't go on a rant or try to defend himself. He just kept his head down and waited for his final episodes to air. He knew the truth, and he knew the people who really worked in the shop knew the truth too. He was done playing the role of the sidekick in Richard's play. He wanted to go his own way, just like the famous song says. His final day at the shop had no fanfare. He packed up his stuff and walked right out the door, leaving behind the fame and the money. He was taking a huge risk by leaving the biggest show on Discovery, but he didn't care. He would rather be a broke builder with his pride than a rich character on a fake show. But as he drove away from Gas Monkey for the last time, everyone wondered the same thing. Could he actually make it on his own? Or was he about to find out that the grass isn't always greener? The engineering revenge. After Aaron left the bright lights of Discovery, people thought he might just disappear from their screens forever. Some fans even joked that without Richard to sell the cars, Aaron would have nothing to do. But Aaron had a plan that was much bigger and much louder than anything seen on Fast and Loud. He wanted to prove that his skills were real, and he did it with a truck he called Old Smoky. Old Smoky started as a 1949 Ford F1. On the outside, it looked like a rusty old farm truck, but underneath the metal, Aaron was building a beast. He didn't have a TV producer telling him to hurry up, so he took his time to get everything right. He put in a giant Cummins diesel engine and added 2 massive turbos. The truck ended up having 1,200 horsepower and enough torque to pull a mountain. It was an engineering masterpiece that would have been impossible to build under Richard's 2-week deadlines. In 2022, Aaron took Old Smoky to the most dangerous race in the world, the Pikes Peak International Hill Climb. This race goes up a massive mountain in Colorado with over 150 turns and cliffs that drop off into nothing. There are no guardrails, and if you make one mistake, it is all over. The weather that year was a total nightmare, and the mountain was covered in thick fog and ice, making the road as slippery as a skating rink. The truck was so powerful that it spit out thick black smoke and roared like a jet engine. Watching it fly around those tight corners was terrifying and amazing at the same time. This was Aaron's opportunity to show the world what happens when a builder is finally allowed to follow his own vision. It was his way of getting revenge on the years he spent building cheap cars for TV. And although he didn't take home the first place trophy that day, he finished with a time of 14 minutes and 48 seconds. But in the racing world, just making it to the top in those conditions is a massive win. While other fancy cars crashed or broke down, Aaron's hand-built truck conquered the mountain. And so, Old Smoky became a legend in the car world. The truck was a giant middle finger to the Fast and Loud style of work. It was slow to build, expensive to make, but it was perfect in every way. And with it, Aaron had finally climbed out of the shadow of Gas Monkey, and he did it at 14,000 feet above sea level, the Arclight struggle. After leaving Fast and Loud, it made sense for Aaron to start up his own thing, and he did. When he opened Arclight Fabrication in Dallas, he thought he was finally walking into the light. He had a hand-picked crew and no more cameras watching his every move. There were no more fake deadlines or producers yelling about the budget. It was supposed to be a dream come true, but Aaron quickly learned that being the guy in charge is its own kind of nightmare. Suddenly, he was building a business from the ground up and not just building cars. In the old days, Richard handled the boring stuff. Richard dealt with the lawyers, taxes, payroll, and the angry customers. Aaron just had to focus on the metal. But at Arclight, every single problem landed on Aaron's desk. He spent more time looking at spreadsheets and bills than he did looking at engines. He was buried in phone calls and paperwork. The pressure was so high that it started to change him. He was tired, stressed, and his employees could see the tension in his face. He realized that the freedom he wanted came with a very high price. He was working just as hard as he did at Gas Monkey, but now all the risk was on his shoulders. There were months where the money was tight and the stress was almost too much to handle. He even admitted that being the boss was the hardest thing he had ever done. He stayed focused on what he loved, classic Ford F-100 trucks. He built a system where fans could buy parts to fix their own rides at home. He wanted to help the little guy instead of just selling to rich collectors. Even though the business was a struggle, it was his struggle. He was building a home for his own ideas and wasn't just building a kingdom for someone else. He finally found a way to be a businessman without losing his soul, but the journey left scars that still haven't fully healed. But he at least was able to prove that he could survive without the loud salesman. But unfortunately, the memory of those 14 years still haunts the garage. The real question is whether the man who held the wrench can ever truly forgive the man who held the leash. Was Richard Rawlings just a tough boss trying to win, or was he a villain who stole the best years of a genius? Do you think the way Richard treated his best employee was a smart business move or a truly evil betrayal? Leave your answers in the comments below. Don't forget to like the video and subscribe to the channel. Thank you for watching. And if you enjoy this video, please click on the next one on your screen.